The origins of civilization have always been a subject of fascination, mystery, and wonder throughout history. Various cultures have created foundational myths that attempt to explain how their societies emerged. However, it is difficult to have solid evidence that allows us to pinpoint precisely when and how a civilization was born. Nonetheless, Egypt, the cradle of one of the greatest civilizations in history, is one of the few cultures that has both material and written records, providing a clear view of its early days as well as the rise of its first rulers. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any important content about the darkest chapters of our history. The Nata Playa culture, the first astronomers, long before Egypt became a global power and one of the most influential civilizations in history, its territory was inhabited by small nomadic communities living in regions surrounding the Nile River. Among these early societies, the Nata Playa culture stands out, located in the Nubian Desert, approximately 800 kilometers south of present-day Cairo. This culture flourished between 10,000–5000 BC and is credited with the construction of one of the earliest known astronomical observatories, the Nata Playa megalith, discovered in the 1970s by a team of archaeologists. It is considered one of the oldest astronomical monuments in the world, much older than the famous Stonehenge. This circle of stones was used by the ancient inhabitants of the region to observe the night sky and perform astronomical calculations. According to studies conducted by astrophysicist Thomas Prophet, the stones are aligned with the stars in the Orion's belt, whose position repeats in cycles of 25,000 years. This sophisticated observation of the sky suggests that the inhabitants of Nata Playa already possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy long before the rise of the great pharaonic dynasties. In addition to their astronomical achievements, remains of livestock have been found in Nata Playa in stone chambers covered with clay roofs, suggesting the existence of an early cult to Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of love and fertility, depicted as a cow. This deity would have been highly relevant during the dynastic period, but its roots can be traced back to these early desert societies. The Fayum and Amerindian cultures, the first farmers. Over time, the Nile region began to attract other human groups who sought to settle in its fertile lands. Among the most prominent cultures that emerged after Nata Playa are the Fayum and Amerindian cultures, both known for having developed an agricultural economy, marking a crucial shift in the lifestyle of the inhabitants of the Nile Valley. Fayum, settled in the oasis of the same name southwest of Cairo, flourished between 5200 and 4000 BC. This society was one of the first in Egypt to domesticate plants and animals, mainly engaging in the cultivation of cereals such as wheat and barley. Archaeologists have found granaries where these foods were stored. The inhabitants of Fayum were already beginning to develop a more complex social organization. They lived in reed huts with thatched roofs, which allowed them to make use of the natural resources of the region. The Amerindian culture, on the other hand, inhabited Lower Egypt near what is now the Nile Delta around 4000 BC. Like the Fayumites, the Amerindians were dedicated to agriculture but also to herding and the production of stone tools and terracotta figurines. Their burial rituals consisted of burying the dead in shallow pits covered with mats or animal skins, which gives us an idea of their beliefs about life and death. The Masabuto culture, the first miners. The Masabuto were pioneers in the exploitation of minerals, especially copper, which marked a turning point in the technological development of the Nile Valley. This metal, essential for making tools and weapons, allowed the Masabuto to advance in their social and monetary development. According to Egyptologist Michael Hoffman, they were the first to domesticate donkeys to transport goods over long distances, facilitating trade with southern Canaan and other neighboring regions. They also built some of the first underground huts with chimneys and stoves, which allowed them to cook and heat themselves in the arid desert climate. Another notable feature of the Masabuto culture was the development of necropolises, cemeteries that contained tombs adorned with jewelry and fine ceramics, suggesting a growing respect for burial rituals and a higher social hierarchy. The Nakata culture, the first conquerors. Although all the cultures mentioned played an important role in Egypt's early history, it was the Nakata culture that had a decisive impact on the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, laying the foundations for the pharaonic civilization that would later emerge. This culture developed around 4000 BC and is known for having gone through three main stages of evolution. In the first stage, between 4000 and 3500 BC, the Nakadans stood out for their production of decorated ceramics, bone and ivory tools, and for starting the trade of lapis lazuli, a precious mineral that came from regions as far away as Afghanistan. This long-distance trade encouraged the growth of the Nakada culture and allowed its cities to begin expanding. In the second stage, the city-state of Hierakonpolis consolidated as the main power center of the Nakada culture, dominating neighboring communities and promoting political centralization. It was in Hierakonpolis where the first hieroglyphic signs emerged and the first temple dedicated to the god Horus was built, showing the growing importance of religion in the daily life of the Egyptians. Finally, in the third stage, new cities like Abydos and Thinis began to consolidate their power, culminating in the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the rule of a single pharaoh, Narmer, the first pharaoh of Egypt. The unification of Egypt is considered one of the most important events in the history of ancient Egypt. It was the unification of the two lands, that is, Upper and Lower Egypt, under the rule of a single monarch. This feat is attributed to Narmer, who is considered the first pharaoh of Egypt. According to Manetho, an Egyptian priest and historian from the 3rd century BC, Narmer carried out this unification around 3100 BC. For a long time, Narmer was believed to be a mythical figure, but in 1898, British archaeologist James Quibble discovered in Hierakonpolis a ceremonial palette depicting Narmer as a conqueror. This palette, known as the Narmer palette, is one of the most important artifacts in the history of ancient Egypt, as it symbolizes the pharaoh's victory over his enemies and the consolidation of his power. After Narmer's death, his son ascended to the throne and consolidated the power of the newly unified Egyptian civilization. He founded the city of Memphis as the capital and expanded the empire through military campaigns in Nubia and Libya. He is also credited with advancements in the study of medicine, which earned him the title of the Pharaoh Doctor. Meretnith, wife of Den, son of Aha, was one of the first women to rule Egypt as a pharaoh. Her leadership solidified Egypt's stability, and her tomb in Abydos became a place of pilgrimage. The origins of ancient Egypt are a testament to the cultural richness and complexity of the early societies of the Nile. From the first astronomers of Nata Playa to the consolidation of power under Narmer, the early history of Egypt is full of remarkable achievements that laid the foundations for the great civilization that would dominate the ancient world for thousands of years. If you've made it this far, you've learned something new with our stories. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we can remember the truths that history has often tried to hide.